Bonjour, hi, marhaba, bienvenue à un nouvel épisode de Trait d'Union. Aujourd'hui, j'ai la chance d'avoir Dalia Chidoub, qui est une spécialiste du mouvement. On va vous expliquer plus en détail ce que ça veut dire à travers le podcast et nos échanges. Et avant d'embarquer dans nos conversations, je voulais prendre un moment pour remercier nos partenaires officiels pour la première saison de Trait d'Union. Donc, les filles Fatouche et Montreal Pro Peinture. Et vous pouvez aller les regarder plus en détail ce qu'ils font avec le lien dans la description de l'épisode. Donc, merci beaucoup! Donc, hi Dalia.
Hey.
Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Ça fait tellement plaisir et j'aimerais renchérir ce que tu viens juste de dire. Aujourd'hui, on se donne un espace où est-ce que on se laisse être vulnérable, parler de sujets qu'on parle pas tout le temps. And I applaud you for that. I think it's not really easy to do that. So yeah, I'm really happy to have you here today.
Thanks for having me. Honestly, super overjoyed with being a part of the start of this podcast and for being invited for it and having the space to tell my story. It's really neat. It's really, really cool. It's a big milestone. Appreciate you.
I agree 100%. I think people like you need to share their stories in order to move the society a little bit forward.
Agreed.
So, j'aimerais que tu commences par nous parler un petit peu de ton background. Le podcast, évidemment, porte surtout sur les enfants d'immigrants et sur les manières dont on trace les traits d'union vers la culture majoritaire. Et toi, t'es de mère québécoise et de père marocain.
Exactement.
T'es née, t'as grandi à Montréal.
Oui.
So right off the bat, super important to talk about those things, like your upbringing and everything like that. And also, you're a super cool person. So I'm super interested in like knowing more about like ton parcours professionnel, comment t'es rendu où est-ce que t'es aujourd'hui professionnellement aussi. And just having, like, you know, prendre le pouls de tes opinions sur certaines choses. Mais c'est ça, est-ce que tu peux nous en parler un petit peu plus de ton expérience identitaire? How is it to, like, grow up as half Québécoise, half Moroccan in the society that we live in?
For sure. So you said it. So my mom is French-Canadian, born and raised, and my dad is Moroccan. My dad immigrated here when he was 18.
Wow.
So quite young. So he spent most of his life here in Montreal and really has immersed himself in the Canadian culture. It was the idea for a better life, I think. As much as he appreciates and loves his home, I think he came here, or at least grew up in a culture where leaving his native country and coming to a westernized country like Canada was for a better life for himself. So he immigrated here. He tells me the story. I immigrated here with $400 in my pocket, came to school, hustled and
every immigrant parent, by the way.
Every parent.
Yeah.
Hustled really hard, grew, and climbed this ladder. Same with my mom. My mom is a trailblazer. She is business smart, street smart, and a hard worker. They met when they were working at a bank together. Okay. So he was her manager, I think, and they kind of had this like really cute friend love story. And yeah, ended up having me and my younger brother. So I'm a family of two, and yeah, that's a little bit about, I guess, my like upbringing.
Yeah.
We talked a little bit about religion in the household. I think my parents were very, very open and understanding to the fact that they both come from very different backgrounds and different cultures, and that was offered to me with a lot of openness, especially growing up. So giving me the space to learn a little bit about my Moroccan culture, learn a bit about like the French and Canadian culture, as well as the religions tied to it. So my mom's Catholic, my dad's Muslim, and offering, I guess, information from both sides. My dad is a very analytical man, a lot of science in his vocabulary too, so I was kind of given the space to learn beyond the religious aspect and the opportunity to kind of make the decision for myself, so ask questions. So a lot of our dinner tables growing up was like coming home. I remember in elementary school there was like, I think in a group of like 300 people, there was like 6 classes of Catholic religion and then one morale et éthique. And I was in morale et éthique.
Le cours sur toutes les religions.
Exactement.
et l'éthique en
Mais
général.
la plupart du monde était dans les cours de religion, puis il y avait juste une petite groupe qui était dans le cours de morale et éthique.
Ça, c'était... Actually, je pense qu'on a le même âge.
Oui, je pense que oui.
Attends, moi, j'ai 27, toi, t'as 28.
Oui.
Fait qu'on a 1 an de différence. Puis je pense que nous, dans les réformes scolaires, on a été comme les dernières années qui ont connu les cours de religion à l'école.
Ouais.
So it's interesting because nowadays,
It's not as
in like the
present
normal
anymore,
like school system, when I say normal, I mean like governmental, like funded, y a pas de cours de religion. C'est des cours d'éthique et culture religieuse, je pense, encore.
Yeah.
Mais...
Which is neat, because that's the classes that I was involved. Puis je me rappelle, c'était des bonnes conversations qu'on avait où est-ce que la professeure a donné un topic to kind of discuss. Puis vraiment, le cours, il donnait toutes leurs opinions. Mais je m'en rappelle, à ce temps-là, quand on avait les cours, je me sentais quasiment séparée. I felt FOMO with like all my other friends that were going in Catholic classes. Je me rappelle revenir à la maison puis poser la question à mes parents, like, why am I not in that class?
Yeah.
And my parents were like, do you want to be in that class? I'm like, well, what's happening in that class? Tell me a little bit more. And then after them explaining, I guess, the both sides of it, I was like, no, I actually like my morale et éthique class where I'm actually having like good conversations where it's thought-provoking and we're really like pushing the envelope in some way. So I was really grateful for the space to ask those questions and to get both sides and make that decision for myself. So really grateful for the way that they kind of guided my upbringing when it comes to deciding what religion to go for.
Yeah.
And it's always learning opportunities to hear it from both their standpoints and kind of like compare between the two. So, yeah.
Yeah. And your parents, so they come from different cultural and religious backgrounds.
Very much, yeah.
But with the years, because they're learning from the other constantly, est-ce qu'il y avait des choses qui étaient comme, ça m'intéresse d'en savoir un peu plus, ça m'intéresse d'en savoir un peu plus sur chacun du bord de l'autre. Puis finalement, they're kind of like creating their own little common culture at home. Like, I don't know if that's making sense.
I think that makes total sense. I think there is some truth to that for sure. I think there was a lot of like partnership where my parents had to like discuss and sit down at the table, like, what is it like to baptize your kids, or what does marriage look like, or what even just like dating. Like I remember like, are boys allowed to come over to my house? Like, could they stay over? And like that discomfort, I guess, with my dad in the early stages of me like going through those motions, and my mom kind of like walking him through it of like, it's okay, that's what we do here, you know?
Yeah.
So I think there is some level of partnership that came from it. And then as far as them sharing each their little tidbits, I think it was more centered around culture than religion.
Yeah.
Like, my mom learned how to cook a lot of Moroccan food.
That's so
She's
cool.
a really big cook, and I think she felt excited to kind of learn that side of my dad's way.
Les pastillas?
No.
No?
I don't know if that's...
I think it's Moroccan.
Is it? See,
my aunt who's Moroccan, she does those, and it's like the best thing ever.
That's where my like imposter syndrome comes in. Like, I have no idea what you're talking about.
But also there's different regions in Morocco, so if you're not from the same region, I'm sure it's different foods.
Yeah.
So,
a lot more like
no imposter syndrome.
Different foods in that way, more dinner foods, but we have a lot of like the big tagine plates, and then there's a lot of like social aspect around it where it's like we'll try and bring friends over, my parents' friends who are more predominantly white, go through that experience, and then the stamp of approval from my dad too, of like, yeah, mom, you did it good, you like really created this authentic meal in a beautiful way. So exploring those different forms of culture, there's obviously a lot of information that I still feel like I lack. Part of that side of me that I still feel like I'm developing or still figuring out. And it's hard to do it here in Montreal. It's hard to do here in Canada. I mean, my dad has like a select few friends and cousins that live here in Morocco, but I can't say that I like grew up with cousins where I grew up with that side of my family. Like, my dad barely speaks Arabic too. I don't speak a lick of Arabic. So limited access to information for me to immerse myself in that side. So it stemmed from being curious and me actually sitting down with my dad and asking questions, because I don't think it was voluntarily offered in the same way of the day-to-day, because it's hard to explore those topics, I guess.
But like listening to you, I'm like noticing a few things that I think can like explain a lot of why you are the way you are today as a Moroccan in terms of like knowledge and knowledge on your culture. Like your dad came here when he was fairly young, you know, young, so yeah, sure. he grew up 18 years in Morocco, but he lived more of his life here than he did there.
Vraiment.
So son processus de sa jeune vie d'adulte, ça a été à Montréal.
Ouais.
And I think that has like a huge impact on the adult that you become.
Yeah.
Parce que c'est des années qui sont vraiment, tu sais, forgeuses. Là, je pense à des parents qui sont venus plus sur le tard au Québec. They probably came with a bigger, more baggage, like cultural baggage, than someone who came at a younger age. Like your dad came here, he was 18. He probably got access to more like social circles where he could make friends and find his own path and not be in the category of like tous les immigrants du Maroc qui sont venus à genre 25 ans et plus, qui ont des enfants mariés and direct sur le marché du travail, you know? I think that also has an impact.
Yeah. If I could add to, je pense que le niveau de plus de difficulté ou pas de difficulté ou le challenge que mon père a vécu, parce que là, ça date quasiment de 30 ans qu'il a immigré ici, puis Montréal ou Québec, il y a 30 ans, a l'air beaucoup plus différent de qu'est-ce que c'est maintenant à Montréal. And my dad's name is Mohammed. Like, you can't get a more Arab name than that. And then moving through some of those pillar moments in life, like 9/11, where there's a discomfort associated to the way he looks and then his name. And my dad works in mechanics. He's a mechanical engineer. He works in, like, diesel engines. He works with as many white male Quebecers as you could probably imagine. And so coming in, like, my dad naturally speaks Parisian French, but learned how to properly switch between Quebecer French. And he does that, like, really a skill in his back pocket. And he switched his name to Mo instead of Mohammed, so he could kind of, like, immerse himself and kind of, like, blend in.
Yeah.
Because he didn't want to be associated with those, like, racist, prejudiced thoughts that were being spoken to for that culture. And I think that cet impact qu'il y a eu sur mon père à un jeune âge a changé la façon qu'il a aussi été un parent. And wanting to protect and wanting to avoid that experience for me. So oui, j'ai pas l'air de quelqu'un qui est blanche, pas l'air de quelqu'un qui est né à Montréal, mais je me tiens comme quelqu'un qui est blanc, and I guess that's what we could, like, dive into, just, like, sometimes feeling more white and Canadian than my Moroccan side for that reason, for how my dad ended up raising us and how he kind of, like, collaborated with my mom to make sure that we also get that full Canadian experience and language and demeanor and behaviors and stuff like that.
You took the words right out of my mouth. I was going to tell you, like, because your dad, that was his story, that's part of who he is as an individual, and therefore that's the parent that he became, you know? Puis je trouve que souvent, en tant qu'enfant d'immigrants, on en veut des fois à nos parents pour pas nous avoir transmis certaines choses, que ce soit de la culture ou de la langue. Mais je pense que dans tous les cas, il faut comprendre que le parcours migratoire de nos parents, il a été difficile. C'est pas toujours facile, même si certains des parcours sont pas sur une note négative. Ça reste un processus qui est difficile. Tu arrives dans un nouveau pays, une nouvelle société, tu dois apprendre la langue ou apprendre l'accent, comprendre les expressions, how everything works, like the culture and everything. Puis souvent, les parents, quand ils viennent, ils vont essayer de s'intégrer, mais en créant un peu une distance avec leur culture qu'ils ont laissée à la maison, plutôt que de trouver une manière de balance and navigate through the both of them. And I think when you come at such a young age, you barely had the chance to, like, experience your culture from back home to the fullest. And now you're coming in this new place and you have to, like, understand quickly and, like, catch up with everybody else. Yeah. So, comme, tu sais, j'écoute l'histoire un peu de ton père et en tant que parent, je compatis tellement.
For sure.
Puis je me mets à ta place et je me dis, Like, it's like, oh, tu peux pas lui en vouloir parce qu'il peut pas te transmettre quelque chose qu'il a pas eu la chance d'expérimenter à 100% non plus. Like, and maybe he would have the syndrome d'un imposteur aussi, you know, by like teaching you all these things that are really part of who he is today as an individual, you know, because he spends so much more time here.
Suppressing it, putting it aside,
but that too,
changing it.
that's also like not something that I encourage, you know, suppressing something.
And I think that's the exciting part of like now shifting my relationship with my father, even both my parents in this like adult age, because c'est excitant de voir aujourd'hui comment la dialogue a changé un peu et comment on est un peu ouvert et on espère de donner un peu plus d'espace aux personnes avec une culture différente que celle à Montréal pour donner accès un peu plus à l'information, pour qu'on puisse apprendre, pour qu'on puisse grandir and like be our more authentic self.
Yeah.
So for me, like I have an upcoming trip actually to Morocco with my father this week.
With him?
Yeah, so I'm headed with him for 3 weeks, and we're going to visit all his family. And it is an experience that I'm just like looking forward to so much. One, because I feel like I'm going with a whole different lens of just like trying to be open to this culture that is supposed to be half of me, but know very little of. And then like shedding light on my dad, like giving him the space to actually educate and like teach me some of his side and something that maybe he shunned away from for that reason, for the ability to integrate and to be a part of this Montreal community. But now I feel like it's coming back up and we get to like expand ourselves a little bit more and take space and be who we actually are. So I think that that's where I guess the parental role now shifts in this adult's life, right? Where we get to change our relationship from father-daughter, but actually like
we're both on this journey together.
C'est ça, exactement. Fait que j'espère qu'il va trouver un peu plus d'ouverture en m'apprenant un peu ces affaires-là. Oui.
Mais est-ce que ton père est retourné au Maroc depuis...
Oui, lui, il retourne quand même souvent. Je pense qu'il essaie d'y aller au moins une fois par année, sinon à chaque 2 ans. Fait qu'il va quand même souvent. Mais c'est dispendieux quand même d'y aller au Maroc. Fait que c'est pour moi de où est-ce que je suis dans ma vie, and I guess the privilege that I have, didn't really have the ability to go that often. My dad goes for like 1 month, if not more.
That's amazing.
Because he wants to just like spend time with his whole family's there. So my entire dad's side of the family is still there. But no, it's been about like over 15 years that I haven't gone myself.
That's
so
crazy.
I'm going in with a whole different lens.
Honestly, it's such an interesting journey to go back to the country where your roots are from. Like you've been there, but you were there at a very young age with a different mentality and perspective on your origins and understanding yourself and everything. Now you're going as an adult who's sure of who she is, who knows where she's going. You know, you're confident. Like you're not gonna let anybody dictate who you are and aren't, you know. Puis dans mon cas, quand moi j'avais jamais été au Moyen-Orient de ma vie, ma famille était à Paris, fait que je retournais à Paris pendant l'été. Puis la première fois que je suis allée au Moyen-Orient, c'était en Égypte, mais je suis allée sans mon père, je suis allée seule.
Wow.
And it was very interesting to like make sense of things about me that didn't necessarily make sense to me with the knowledge that I had that was accessible to me in Montreal. Puis je suis retournée comme 6 mois plus tard avec mon père. Puis depuis ce temps-là, mon père, il n'avait pas été en Égypte pendant comme 20 ans.
Wow.
Plus que ça même. Puis on est retourné comme plusieurs fois depuis notre grand retour, si on veut. Puis d'être en Égypte avec mon père, de le voir like in his element was like life-changing to me, you know?
That's adorable.
Yeah, because my dad, like, I think both my parents were very... I always saw my parents as immigrants who, like, made it, you know? Obviously, they came to Montreal with the upper hand that they speak French and that they knew people in the city. So you already come here... Even though it's the unknown, you kind of have, like, t'as des repères. T'es pas comme laissé absolument dans l'inconnu. mais c'est quand même des personnes qui ont fait l'effort d'adopter la culture montréalaise et québécoise, écouter la radio québécoise, like get into hockey. Like nobody knows about hockey in Egypt at that like time, you know. We're talking about like 30 years ago. Tu sais, mon père, tu sais, il est fan de toutes ces choses-là. Il prend le temps de se renseigner, d'avoir des collègues un peu de partout et tout. But at the end of the day, like a huge part of him is like in that country, you know? And there's a lot of parts of him that he can't like let live freely here because they just, where would it go, you know? So going back to Egypt with my father was very, like, it was a beautiful moment, you know? Puis on est allé dans plein d'endroits qui lui rappelaient un peu son enfance puis sa jeunesse. Puis c'était nice parce que vu que j'avais déjà été en Égypte, I kind of got to experience my own version of Egypt. And then kind of see it through my dad's eyes as well. So it was very nice. I wish you the same thing with your father.
I mean, you're telling your story and I have chills because I think this is a milestone that I'm really, really looking forward to. I think for me, out of university, I decided to backpack for a little bit. So I backpacked for like 4 or 5 months out of university and I traveled to a lot of different places pretty much around the world. Puis je me rappelle quand j'avais dit à mes parents que je m'en vais. J'ai terminé mes écoles. I did it. I got that degree. Got that piece of paper. I'm out. Fait que je voulais vraiment avoir une expérience à l'extérieur de Montréal. C'était super important pour moi, juste pour avoir une différente perspective de qu'est-ce qui est ici à Montréal. Je me rappelle, je pense qu'il y avait pas qui était reluctant or dismissive of it, mais il y avait des questionnements comme what are you gonna find out there, you know, like on est venu ici, I came here, j'ai créé une vie ici, la vie est belle ici, what is there to experience? And he quickly understood, and both of them understood and lived kind of vicariously through me as I kind of traveled around. Mais maintenant, aujourd'hui, je pense qu'il réalise à quel point j'ai eu l'expérience de voyager puis de me mettre dans une place complètement inconnue and to like figure it out and to like to just figure it out. Fait que maintenant qu'on s'en va au Maroc, même lui, quand il va voir la famille. Il fait pas son côté tourisme, mais je pense même lui, il a pas vraiment fait son expérience autour de Maroc. Puis des fois, j'envoie des petites villes au Maroc, et he's like, I have no idea where that is. Fait que là, on est en train de préparer un peu notre voyage, puis comme j'aimerais ça que je t'apporte où est-ce que je suis née. And I'm like, let's do it. He's like, I don't really know the train system, but I know the train system's really good. I'm like, great, easy. Train system, figuring out in an unknown place, I got you. And he's like, and then I have a cousin that says like taking a ferry right into Spain is super accessible. I'm like, yeah, duh, easy.
It is actually.
So I think he's kind of relying on me to get the like travel logistics out, and he's kind of just going to be my Arab-speaking travel partner, and hopefully like we both get something out of it, where he like actually gets to see Morocco from a different lens, from like more of a touristic, exciting way, but still some familiarity to it. So I think our skills are going to be complementary, where like moi je suis ouverte d'esprit, je suis débrouillard, je suis capable de voyager, j'en ai fait, versus mon père qui en a fait beaucoup moins, mais he was born in that country, right? So no, I'm like, it should be a nice switch for our relationship, and I'm really, really looking forward to that, for
Honestly, it's probably going to be like a life-changing trip.
Oh, I'm like cozy in that idea.
For you and for like your relationship with your father as well.
Yeah.
And like that trip for your father reminds me of a trip my mom did this summer. So my mom was born in Lebanon, but she moved to Paris at a very young age because of the war. So when she would go back to Lebanon, it was always to go see family.
Yeah.
That's all she did. She would get to the airport at Beirut and then drive all the way to the south of Lebanon to go see family.
Yeah.
That's it. That's all she would do. She never visited Lebanon comme dans son entièreté, you know, like in France, she's done everything in France. Like in Quebec, she's done so many things here. But like in her own native country, she didn't get to visit much, you know?
Different priorities,
different like circumstances as well. Things have evolved a lot, like just in terms of like transportation. Comme il y a des routes aujourd'hui qu'il n'y avait pas avant, you know? Puis she didn't go back though for years as well, like my dad. Both my parents kind of like took a step back from like those countries in a way, where they had their own communities here that reminded them of home.
Yeah.
And I think they were kind of like scared to go back to a country that they don't recognize. I think a lot of parents have that issue.
For sure.
Puis I went last year for the first time, and I was like, you have to go back. Like, it's just, I can't let you live and not go back to your country.
Yeah.
You know, like, you have to go. Like, it's not going to be the way that you think it's going to be.
Yeah.
It's not going to be like the way it used to be, but it's going to be beautiful regardless, you know? And so she went this summer to Lebanon with her mom.
Oh, cool.
And so she had never been to Lebanon with her mother for decades, you know? And they kind of got that trip where they actually took the time to travel around Lebanon. And they went to all those places that I was raving about that my mom, who's Lebanese, who was born there, never got to experience.
That's so special.
Yeah, so c'est un peu comme le même voyage que tu fais avec ton père, mais que ma mère a fait avec sa mère à elle. And she came back and like, she's so excited to go back again, you know?
Oh, that's so
and now
sweet.
I'm excited to go to Lebanon one day with my own mother, you know? Like, I got to see a lot of Lebanon, but I can't wait to see...
to share that experience
yeah,
with her.
and to see Lebanon through her eyes as well. Like, I got to see Egypt through my dad's eyes, got to see Egypt through my own eyes, I got to see Lebanon through my own as well, but now I'm excited to see it with her and with my grandma, you know? I think those are very special trips.
Ouais, no, I completely agree. Je pense qu'il y a tellement de valeur dans le voyage aussi, puis d'explorer ce côté de toi, because I think it just answers questions for yourself so much more. It broadens your perspective. I think we get really stuck in the hustle and bustle. We really get stuck in like our day-to-day tasks that we kind of forget the humans that are circling not only around you in like your close proximity, but across the world too. And if your perspective could be influenced by something that is home deep down, I think that's a really, really neat experience. So I'm looking forward to it. We'll have to do maybe a part 2 where I kind of like dive in onto all those beautiful things, because I agree. There's no way that this trip isn't freaking amazing. Yeah. So I'm really looking forward to it.
I'm looking forward to it for you.
Thanks, babe. Appreciate it.
And also, like, I had a question. Because your mom is Québécoise and your dad is Moroccan, and you were born and raised here.
Yep.
And now you're going to get to experience a side of you that you didn't get to know on a daily, all around you, every day of your life, because you were born and raised here and not there. So would you say that maybe the reason why you identify more as Québécoise is because that culture was more accessible to you here?
For sure, 100%. Je pense que c'est exactement ça. And I don't, like we said previously, like I don't resent anything in my parents, because how else were they going to do it, right? Like, my entire dad's side of the family is on the other side of the pond, and my mom's entire side is here. And so I think there was like a welcomeness that was that happened from my mom's family, where it was big. We were a big part of that, and my dad was very welcomed too. And
That's nice.
I think that is a beautiful thing, where it was very acceptable. And I think there's an openness that was on my mother's culture that I'm super grateful for. But when you look at it, like, I was born and raised in suburbs, West Island, went to primarily French Catholic white school, and then did most of the schooling a part of that community. And I think the other aspect too is, like, I'm French Canadian en guillemets, but I have a bigger association to the English community. This might be a huge generalized statement, but there's not a lot of Moroccan or Arabs who are on the English speaking side. So I don't even think in my friend group, or like the thing with a lot of like immigrant parents is like they were put in a setting where there was a lot more immigrant families, and they kind of all went into the same district and community, where I didn't really have that. So most of my friend groups were like white English-speaking people. And so that definitely changes my upbringing. It changes how I like have social dynamics and make friends and converse and speak. And so there's definitely an influence on how that impacted me and the human that I am and the qualities that I have because of that.
I think socially speaking, like the people you surround yourself with have a huge impact on the way that you shape yourself as a person. So I think it makes total sense that because your upbringing was in that specific context, that you feel the way you feel today.
For sure.
Mais on parlait un peu aussi de l'apparence physique.
Ouais.
Comme sur papier, ton nom a quand même une consonance arabe assez forte.
Oui.
Puis physiquement aussi, you know, like you have a darker skin, the eyes that like, you know, like mellow eyes that have this like ethnic ambiguous side to you. The freckles, like when
big question mark.
See, people look at you and they're like, where is she from? You know?
Big
and like the
mark.
way that you speak and like the person that you are maybe on paper sounds more like Canadian or Québécois, but like physically it doesn't. So there's like this like blocage, si on veut, you know, like when somebody looks at you versus when somebody speaks to you and gets to know you, they're like, but wait, like where do I, like which box do I put her in? You know?
And hey, I asked myself those same questions and had a really hard time growing up with those same questions. I think I realized that I was different very, very young. And I think well, yeah, like for me too, like even just developing in a different way really, really young. Like,
oh my God.
I got curves real fast. My hair is curly, does not last through the humidity. And so those were all things that I think I struggled. Like I danced ballet, but clearly I was not like a ballerina figure. And so a lot of those questions came up of like, why don't I look like everyone else around me? And spent a lot of time, like I went to a high school where we had a uniform, so I was able to like kind of mold myself to look like everyone else, but then there was small things in the way that I expressed myself where I straightened my hair every single day. Like I got a keratin treatment.
No.
Even at some point, like I decided I'm going to be blonde. Like there was moments where like I tried to mold in, I tried to fit in, and it's funny because it's only, I think in my late 20s that I'm now embracing my curls, embracing my curves, embracing my color, and even just embracing those questions of like, I could tell that I'm an enigma to most people. And I think I would kind of like, I would take it defensively, whereas like, tu viens d'où? And I'm like, je suis Canadienne, je suis aussi Canadienne que toi, Jean-Luc. Like, I could speak Quebec or French, I could speak English, like I'm born and raised here, and almost like fighting it, versus now I'm like, damn, I realize that there's a whole half of me that I actually have not tapped into or not embracing or not loving. And it's a learning process where I'm like, I chopped all that keratin out, I like got all that blonde out, and I'm re-embracing like how my hair naturally falls and my body and how to properly dress for it, and selecting things that I actually like versus trying to mold myself to the people that I see around. And that's like thanks to people that are actually taking space from that more diverse background that is giving me the ability to express that too, of like understanding what products to put in my hair and how to actually like utilize the natural curls that I have and try to enhance it a little bit more versus trying to like mold what every other white babe is doing, which is like cool, but it's not me.
It's not you. And you're saying so many interesting things.
Oh, good.
Like,
I'm glad.
I think it has a lot to do with like awareness.
Yeah.
Like for example, like dyeing your hair blonde, straightening your hair. There's no problem with any of those things, you know.
Of course not.
As long as you know why you're doing them, and it's not like in response of like, I don't know who I am, and I want to look the way that I feel or like identify the most to, and I want to be recognized for that. I don't want to be asked questions, so I'm going to do what I can to just fit in, you know? And it's such a hard thing. And I think like as a teenager, we're more like rebels when people ask us these questions. Like, I think now, like as adults, and I spoke about this on another episode, we know who we are. We made peace with a lot of things, and we made peace with the fact that like we don't fully know who we can be. Like you said, you're still tapping into this other side of you that you're excited to get to know more, you know, but you don't have that anger anymore. And I think when you're a kid or a teenager in schools and in like in parts of Montreal where no one looks like you, nobody speaks like you, nobody eats the same food as you. It's like, it's the natural reaction to like get offended and like defensive when someone brings up your differences. Mm-hmm. And then you're just like, ben là, moi aussi, you know? Or like, or the opposite, you're gonna try your best to like be the complete opposite of who they are. So they can never like create a, you know, a bridge to you. You're like, no, I'm me and you're you and we're completely different. When actually you're much more alike than you are different. And you are, maybe you have more to you than what you thought. And I think it's like, it's a process, you know, like making peace with all these things and accepting parts of you and maybe giving place to other parts of you that you didn't want to give place to before, and vice versa. Like the fact that you're embracing your curls more and your skin color and your freckles and your natural beauty and your curves and all of that, I think it's like a journey.
It is, 100%.
Yeah, like you're slowly getting to find out like who Dalia is without all the noise. And then maybe like, I don't know, down the line, you're gonna be like, oh, I actually love the way I felt straightening my hair, you know? And maybe you're gonna be like, no, I actually love my curls and I'm happy that I'm loving my curls now because it's, you know, like, c'est dommage que j'avais pas fait ça avant, but it's never too late to like embrace who you are. It's a process.
And it's all of that, right? It's like recognizing that like I'm everything.
Yeah.
I think when like deep pandemic, I remember a lot of like the conversations around Black Lives Matter were coming out. A lot of the conversation around Asian hate was coming up. And so there was a big dialect around une appartenance à ta culture and taking space and like, what side are you on or who are you supporting? And I think for me, I had a really hard time putting a term to it where I was just like, je suis marocaine, je suis canadienne, like, trying to need to put a label to it. Puis j'ai réalisé par la suite que je suis vraiment toute. Il y a une diversité de moi en tant qu'individuel où est-ce que j'ai une appartenance à plusieurs catégories and I have the ability to incorporate all of those in who I am. Like, I can straighten my hair and I can be more... I don't even know. Yeah, I can do that, but I also could embrace the more Moroccan culture and enhance those natural features that I have too. And it's cool to be able to like play around with that and even just like dressing more feminine, dressing more masculine, and all those things being an exploration. And so huge gratitude, I think, to the younger generation, because I really think that they're helping me to kind of explore that side of me and taking space in that, because I think when I was 18, 19, I kind of just felt like an ugly duckling and wanted to just like...
feel that in my soul.
Good.
Mais it's funny that you bring the other like the younger generation, because I think every generation has their own pros and cons and their own experience. And I think, okay, yes, we have a lot in common, but also I think what... like that's the common denominator is that we're part from the same generation, and so we experienced our own things, but at the same time in a time where il n'y avait pas de représentativité dans les films, dans les séries, dans la musique, dans les magazines, like none of that, you know. So obviously, like at school, everybody was straightening their hair. Everybody was doing the things that you had, the things to look the way everybody did, you know. But today, the reality is there's like social media platforms. We didn't have social media platforms growing up. Like it came much later, like maybe towards the end of high school.
And even when it was out, it looked or was for the purpose, such different purposes, right? Like it was not to
it wasn't
generate business or
to who it caters to today. It didn't have the spaces that exist today where people are more open about who they are and kind of like start throwing out like all the labels, you know? Like teenagers today have their own problems, you know, their own challenges. But I think one thing they have that we didn't was that la représentativité, you know, to be able to look up to someone who looks like them, and maybe they take it for granted in the sense where they don't realize that back then those types of people were probably the only ones who looked that way, you know, in a pool of people at school or in the community or whatever. C'est dur parce que justement, tu sais, quand t'es jeune, tu te fies beaucoup sur les gens autour de toi, ce que tu vois à la télé. Like, if there's a celebrity that everybody, like, worships and she has short hair and it's, like, blonde with blue streaks, everybody is going to want to have short hair, get it blonde, and have blue streaks in them, you know? Or, like, thin eyebrows, or like...
Yep.
See?
Thin eyebrows.
Where?
We all went through it.
Like, we
the
all went through those
back was
phases,
hard.
but, like, now, I'm sure if we were to have those conversations with, like, teenagers today, they'd be like, what? Like, really? Like, that's so weird. Like, no, like, love who you are and, like, embrace all the diversity. But, like, back then, we didn't have that space, you know?
Mais c'est la beauté de chaque génération, puis le progrès que chaque génération fait. Puis je pense que c'est ça qui est excitant de, like, to grow older, right? Like, I'm itching towards my 30s now, and I changed careers last year and really starting to ask myself, like, what is it that I want out of this life, and asking myself those questions and doing a lot of, like, self-development and a lot of introspection. Où est-ce que tu te poses des questions? Qu'est-ce que tu veux dans ta vie? Mais c'est des questions que cette génération-là est en train de se poser à 20, 21 ans de qu'est-ce qu'ils veulent de leur vie. Des questions que nous, je pense qu'on n'avait pas nécessairement dans nos têtes à ce temps-là. Mais c'est excitant parce que si tu regardes la génération de mes parents, it's like, what do I need to do to make ends meet? Like, how hard am I going to hustle? How hard am I going to get a 9-to-5 to create that security, to create that stability, especially when you're an immigrant? And so that is a privilege that I feel like I have, and a privilege that they're having. And I'm like, as much as there is absolute chaos happening in this world and a lot of down stuff, I think there is a lot of opportunity and a lot of excitement happening with what technology is going to be able to give to us, what is this inclusivity and representation is going to give for us. And I'm excited to see what the world looks like in 10 years.
So excited for that too.
Because of the younger generation. And I think, yes, they probably don't know what the struggle was to have thin eyebrows and straightened hair in the middle of summer when it's curly. But hey, it's okay. That is my work that I need to do. My work to, like, improve, and just, like, look to them to kind of learn, and also look to the older demographic to learn too. And it's what it's like to be in a society and a community and growing together.
It's beautiful that you're acknowledging that you're learning from the younger generation. I think older generations often feel like because they're the older one, they have more life experiences, they know best. But the world is evolving so fast, and the people who are, like, at the front of, like, that plane ride are the younger generation, so they know things before we do, and we're, like, learning from them, you know? Sometimes it's hard to accept that as someone who's older, but it's important, you know? It's like, it's nothing to be ashamed about, to be learning from someone who's younger. And, like, you know, Gen Z, like, we always make fun of Gen Z, but Gen Z teaches us a lot and has been making society advance as well in certain areas. Millennials too, you know, like, if Gen Z is who they are today, it's also because of all the work that the millennials did and the previous generations. But anyways, that was just, like, une petite parenthèse.
I agree.
That I thought was interesting to make.
Approach life without ego. And I swear you're going to learn so much more.
I love that.
You realize that even 5-year-olds are probably the smartest little humans that you've ever met.
They actually are,
they
though.
They really are. They say nothing but truth.
En français, on dit tout le temps la vérité sort de la bouche des enfants.
I agree.
Puis des fois, il y a des enfants qui vont dire quelque chose and everybody in the room goes quiet and they're like, Yeah, like I didn't want to be the one to say it, but like, hey,
listen to the 5-year-olds.
I love that. But you mentioned your career change,
yeah,
and that's like something I admire so much about you.
Thank you.
Do you want to share a little bit more about what was your career path initially, how you transitioned to the one you're in today?
Sure.
Tap in more about like c'est quoi une spécialiste du mouvement, you know?
Sure. Dans le fond, moi, j'ai fait l'école, c'était toujours super important, surtout venant de mon père. C'était quand même quelque chose qui était bien renforcé, encouragé, and expected.
Of course, he's an immigrant parent, you know?
Exactly.
They did not come here for nothing.
For me not to go to school. So that was highly encouraged. Fait que j'ai fait mon parcours secondaire à une école privée. J'ai fait mon cégep parce qu'on est au Québec. Et par la suite, j'ai fait mon parcours universitaire. It was a little bit of a struggle trying to figure it out, especially in CEGEP. I think out of high school, because I went to a private high school, my grades were up to par for me to transition into science, even though...
You didn't give it much thought initially.
Didn't give it much thought. That was the...
Yeah.
And my dad was like, what's going to open the most amount of doors
for you?
Oh my God.
I think every parent says that.
Don't close doors.
Yeah, pick whatever opens the most doors. But like, what if you don't want any of those doors to be opened, and the only one you want
closes all the majority of the doors, but not to be explored? Just close that door. It's the least amount. So again, no resentment to my parents with that, because I really don't think I would be where I am at today if I didn't go down that path. So I think it's all super important and all super relevant. Mais mon départ au cégep, j'ai essayé un peu en sciences, au point où est-ce que mes notes étaient de la merde. I literally brought my failing exam to my dad, and I was like, I don't think I'm cut out for science.
Sorry.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, it just is not computing in my brain. I'm sorry.
I love that.
I had to break it to him.
I had the same conversations with my parents. I was like,
did you really?
I'm so sorry.
I wish I could.
There's not a doctor in this household. You're
not happening.
Not an engineer, not a pharmacist.
Exactly.
And my dad had such trouble to understand what I was studying.
Yeah.
He was like,
just sit down and it'll go in your brain. I'm like, whatever. I've been here for 8 hours. It's not going in.
Anyways.
Yeah. So I tried those different things out. Both my parents were in business. So they both worked in sales, both in their different industry. I mean, at the time, sales was probably the most safe, secure job, and definitely reinforced. And they instilled very social skills in me, so things like relating or making friends or carrying a room and stuff like that are qualities that I naturally have, just given the type of parents that I have. And I feel like I kind of blended both their skills, and it came into be like I said, my dad is super analytical, very thought out, takes time to make decisions, look at all different avenues, and then pick a direction, versus my mom, who's just hardcore street smart. You put my mom in a room and she will charismatically attract everyone in that room. And so I'm super lucky for the beings that they are, because I think I kind of took both of those.
I love that.
So I decided to venture off in a path of business. So I went into marketing, got my degree, did a few internships throughout my career there. I also worked, I feel like I could say that I worked at Lululemon growing up as well. So I worked at Lululemon for a really long time. That was my part-time job through university. I worked in restoration, or restaurants, hospitality, and all that stuff too. So I bartended, I was a waitress. So a lot of service skills embedded in who I am. And then with Lululemon, a lot of goal setting and ambition developed in me as my core values as well. So,
and also it was a taste of the sports industry, fitness, wellness, all of that.
Well, that's it. Movement was always part of my life. And I don't know if you want to talk about my dance background.
Yeah, go for it.
I think even whatever in high school, movement was always something that was super important to me. I grew up dancing from the age of 3 to 18, and especially in high school, that was my curriculum. Like, that is what I was doing.
You did
like
that.
Yeah, that was my like full-time type of activity. Some people went in sports, some people went in dance, and I was in music, and I was in dance, where I was dancing towards the end like 3-4 hours a day. Like, considered myself an athlete. Dance definitely had some like ups and downs, but I put a lot of physical effort into that craft. And then once I stopped high school, I was like, okay, you're going to let go of this passion and go into business. So that's what I did. I like hung up my little dancing shoes and went into university, and I studied marketing. Once I graduated, like I said, I went traveling for a little bit. I just wanted to open up my mind and experience life paused without it being like one after the other, because I definitely like powered through my schooling, did it in the right amount of years right after it, one after the other. There was no pause taken to like even let these experiences or learnings settle in for me to actually decide what I want to do with life. So traveled. When I came back, it was time for a big girl job. So went through that like interviewing process, try to land as many jobs as I can. So I've worked in a few different corporate companies. I was always in tech sales or in the tech space, just because
so
it was
like a man, predominantly
very
male
much, very
environment.
much, yeah. Even plus my like first job out of university was for a startup company where it was a lot of younger people on the team, but definitely a little bit more male dominant. And I think given the personality that I have, I was like, all right, let's take space on this male dominated team. And so, I mean, I had still those really hard skills that my parents instilled, where I was just like, let's be successful. Let's hustle. Let's put in the work. So right from the get-go, I kind of like developed my own vertical in this company. I was traveling a lot. I was hosting a lot of meetings. And I did really, really well for myself. I like grew this like invisible ladder that we put emphasis on. I did all the like standard things that I guess you should be doing. So right before the pandemic, I bought a house. I like invested in it all on my own. Was working this successful job, lived alone. And then the pandemic hit and realized that I was working in a field that was very successful during the pandemic. So I was really, really busy. My days would look like 7 a.m. meetings till probably 7 p.m., just back to back, hustling back and forth in these meetings. Selling a platform or talking about a platform that really
you don't care about.
Did not make a difference in my life. I think I honestly was fascinated. For me, like I love helping people. And so I loved that the technology had the ability to do that. And I was actually really knees deep with my customers in making sure that whatever product that I was selling was the right product for them, and that it actually had use and meaning to them. But I guess the flip side of being in this industry is there is a lot of pressure as far as like, what are your sales? What are your numbers? How much are you prospecting? How much are you cold calling? How much work are you doing? And then unfortunately in the last like 3 years, selling to companies that were either going through layoffs, recession, a lot of their employees being let go. And here I am with this like, nice solution for them to replace some of their companies. So there was a lot of like clash with my personal morals as far as like being a part of these organizations and working in these companies. In the pandemic, so when I backpack, I did my first yoga teacher training when I was in Bali. I spent 30 days there and I got my first teacher training. It had been 10 years about since I'd been practicing yoga. So once I stopped dancing, I was like, okay, I have to get something similar to dance, but not, because I decided to like retire from that. And yoga was very similar. It was like in a room that looked a lot like a dance room. There was one teacher. Normally there's mirrors. Everyone has their like set up spot, but the language was so different, right? Like the language was like, move for yourself, like come within your mind, check in how your body's feeling, like don't overdo it. This practice is for you. And like coming from dance, which is honestly quite toxic, where it's just like, no, we perform, you got to be the best, you want to, that's solo, what are you eating, how are you taking care of your body? So there was a microscope on you all the time when you were dancing, and then to yoga where it's just like you actually have this 1 hour free for yourself completely to move in a way that feels good. So I fell with love with yoga right off the bat. Like it was something that resonated, it's something that made sense to me, and it was an opportunity for me to just release any anxious thoughts, any stress. Like it was my me time. Yoga was like, okay, let's come back to ourselves. Let's release whatever is going on in life and move for myself for an hour. So when I took my first teacher training, it was just for me. It was just so I could understand the craft a little bit more, understand the foundational information behind yoga and the spiritual side to it. Also, I think if we're coming back to like religion, like I have a Muslim father, a Catholic mother, and I'm a yoga instructor. So it's just kind of a whole blend of spirituality in my head, but it's something that is just so interesting to me because it's a form of t'as une appartenance un peu à une culture de cette façon où est-ce que t'apprends une religion à travers un mouvement that I just was like fascinated about.
C'est vraiment spirituel. Puis la religion et la spiritualité sont liés, mais sont deux choses différentes.
Tout à fait.
Puis tu peux être très spirituelle sans être religieuse, puis tu peux être religieuse sans être spirituelle. Je pense que dans un monde idéal, on n'est pas religieux sans être spirituel, parce que des fois ça peut tendre dans un autre sens, qui est plus politique, plus pour des intérêts qui sont pas pour le bien commun, si on veut. So I think it's very interesting that like you tapped into that spiritual side, you know, like you already had like a taste of it, but now you got the like opportunity to see how you fit in that, you know,
which I also found to be super important, at least to me, and something that I'm still learning about, because I also don't want to be I don't know if imposter is the right word, but I don't want to be an imposter in this teaching that I'm offering, right? Okay. Like yoga has a huge religious side to it that I think in Western culture isn't necessarily incorporated in classes. And I think understanding the background to it so that if there is interest, I'm able to tap into it. But definitely that religious or spiritual side, depending on where I'm teaching, is something that I hold back on to cater to the demographic that I'm teaching right now. But I think anybody who wants to tap into the yoga and even just like Pilates too needs to have like an understanding of the source or where it comes from, because you want to honor whatever practice that you're teaching, right?
Yeah.
So I think that was a super important aspect to me, especially in going to take my first teacher training. And so in the 30 days that we were there, it was a pretty rigid day where you just like start your day with like a meditation, an early morning, and then it's like breaking down all the poses or the anatomy or the spiritual and religious side, where we just spent the whole month just absorbing it with the same group of people. And then at the end of our practice, or at the end of those 30 days, to like get your certification, you have to teach like a 30-minute class to the entire group of people that you're with. And I remember feeling so nervous, so like out of body, like not okay with it. And then flowing through my class, and literally like, I still remember that like cloud nine feeling of leaving the first class that I taught and being like, shit, I think this is actually what I'm supposed to be doing.
I love that.
That's like 6 years ago. Dal, that was just like had an awakening of just like, I really, really love this. And I would love to start daydreaming of a life where I get to do that. So that was like the first trigger, that was the first breadcrumb, but that was not the path yet. That was not the moment for it yet. So came back to Montreal. Like I said, went down my like corporate path, did that for about 6 years. And then in the pandemic, where I like had such a rigid schedule around this icky industry that didn't fully align with my core values, that's when I guess that like younger Dal came back to mind, where I was just like, hey, you spent 18 years dancing, and then you spent another 10 years doing yoga, and you know it lights you up to teach. Why don't we try to tap into that again?
Yeah.
So I took a second certification during the pandemic, all virtually. I was doing the two in parallel, so I would work my day job, and then at night I would log into the recordings, and did that for about 3 months, just getting more certifications and more learnings.
Meanwhile, you were working.
Meanwhile, I was working.
Wow.
Yeah, so I did the two, had the time. I mean, I was alone at home, and
I had the time to write a book. I'm sure you had the time to do that too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like, I just saw an opportunity and I jumped on it, and so I took my second certification. And then when things started opening back up, I'm like, I just want to teach 1 day a week. I just want to like get out there. And so I actually got offered a teaching gig at 2 different studios, 1 day each studio.
Yeah.
So I did that for about 2 years, where I would do my 9 to 5 en guillemets, parce que c'était beaucoup plus qu'un 9 à 5, honnêtement. Et j'allais enseigner par la suite. J'allais faire mon cours, et je m'en rappelle même les journées où est-ce que j'étais complètement fatiguée and like out of it, not feeling it. A lot of stress going into this new skill that I'm trying to develop too. Mais partir de mes cours on a high. Like, so fulfilled, cup filled, feeling like I'm making a difference, feeling like I'm impacting people, connecting with people on a social aspect, which I hadn't been doing for like a year or two because of the pandemic. And it lit me up. And that's when I was able to start crystallizing, I guess, all the ideas that could come from maybe this being my real life. And then in parallel to that, being stuck in a role that brought me absolutely no joy. So for a good 2 years, there was a constant clash of like hating the majority of my day, but feeling absolutely amazing when I do teach. And the thing about being your own entrepreneur is recognizing that things don't happen overnight. I think there is a hustle, there is effort, and there is work that goes into making those switches.
Yeah.
And I try and like be as clear as possible that like I didn't just wake up and be a teacher. Like, I did both of them for 3 years. Social life took a toll. It was hard. It was uncomfortable. But I got to a point last year where I was able to actually like say, you know what? Si c'est pas maintenant, c'est quand que ça va être. C'est là où est-ce que j'ai laissé ma job l'année passée. Fait que ça fait 1 an aujourd'hui que j'ai décidé full-time. Movement specialist is the term that I give it.
I love that, by the way.
For many reasons. I think like, so I since then took my Pilates reformer certification. So I'm also teaching Pilates, both mat and on this like really intricate machine that was created by Joseph Pilates. And have an absolute love for that. I'm also getting my personal training certificate, so that's an extra certification that I'm taking. Yeah, because for me, I think I realize I love learning. I love learning about this. I love learning about the human body, and I love developing my knowledge so that I could be a better instructor for whoever comes to my classes. So that's why I call myself a movement specialist, because I really don't see any limits into what I teach.
I agree. I don't think that there should be a limit at all. You know, like, for example, like artists, like just because you start with one kind of art doesn't mean you can't tap into another one later. And sometimes like putting that label immediately like off the bat, like, oh, you are like a writer, or you're a painter, or whatever it is. You're like, oh, well, I kind of have to stay within those barriers, but like, no, you can do whatever you want. Like, you can be a yoga instructor, you can be a Pilates teacher, you can be a personal trainer.
And how I see it as well is like, because I have so much experience with just moving, and it's more of a solo sport that I've like mastered, where like I've never been like a soccer player, I've never been into like team sports, just because I'm like not adept at all at any of those activities. But I've gotten really good at understanding my body, and this whole practice of yoga, this whole practice of Pilates has changed my life. Like, has made me understand me and my body, my emotions, how I feel anxiety, where I feel it. And I understand it so much that I'm able to master my body. I'm able to try different activities and learn. Like I'm taking up all board activities right now. So I'm learning how to snowboard and surf and longboard, and I suck at it, and it's so great. It's so great because I get to fail and figure out how to control my body so that it actually can mold to this activity. And so the reason why I use movement specialist is because I think I have a good enough understanding about bodies to empower people to understand their body too, and to control it in whatever craft they're doing. Whether you're someone who works the 9 to 5 and sits for a long period of time, understand what is lacking from your body.
Yeah.
You're sitting for long periods of time, what does your body need so it feels good? Vice versus a cyclist who does ultra Ironmans or does like huge races. What muscle groups are they using when they're on a bike, and are they at their high performing peak, and are they aware of their body enough to be able to perform well in their craft? And I think that to learn with me, je leur donne accès à l'information pour être capable de faire leur sport encore mieux. Puis ça vient avec juste être conscient de ton corps et comment être capable de l'utiliser de cette manière-là. So that's really why I've put that term. I'm not saying that I created it, because there's a lot of my mentors that actually use that term, and so I'm really grateful for them to shed light on how they present themselves, because I think I kind of see myself in that field as well, and that's why I use that term too.
I love that so much.
Thanks.
It's like it's original, you know?
Oh,
and I think it describes what you do very well. Like when I first knew about you, I thought yoga, but then I was like, no, there's Pilates. And then the more I'm getting to know you, the more I'm learning all these different sides to
Always
you that are
evolving.
all in the same category that I couldn't put a name on.
Right.
And now it just makes sense.
Movement specialist.
I love that. And also like we did a Pilates class together.
We did.
Well, you were
I
the
taught
teacher.
you.
I was
taught
a student.
you a class.
And this year I started yoga and I started Pilates. I love those. Like those two activities for my body are so beneficial because like obviously you're moving your body and you're like exercising.
Yeah.
But you're also like you're giving yourself a good hour to be on your own, like in your own head, you know? You're not like working in a team sport and you have to think of where's the other person and when do I give the ball or when do I receive.
Puis c'est conscient aussi, je pense que la différence entre un cours de HIIT ou un cours de boxe, c'est quand même, oui, c'est stratégique, c'est contrôlé comme mouvement, mais on dirait que le yoga et le pilates te permet d'être un peu plus dans ton corps, de prendre ça. Mindful movement, to slow it down and to be conscious of how you're using it. So
I love that. Like, honestly, it sounds dramatic, but like yoga definitely changed my life.
I mean, it changed mine.
And for me, yoga is such a small part of my life. So I can only imagine how much it changed yours, you know? Like, if it was able to change mine, I know that it can change a lot of people. So when you do it, like, more than once a week, it has a huge impact on you.
Sure.
And, like, I went on the solo trip to Costa Rica.
Yeah.
And I went for yoga, and like the feeling of just being connected with nature and your body in that moment, just to move, whether you're doing it the right way or you're like, oh my God, my body can't do this. It doesn't matter, you know, like the positive messages that the teachers share throughout the class, I think are so empowering, you know. And then when you're doing the yoga class, you're giving yourself a moment to just be, you know, and not like worry about like what you have to do, where you have to be tomorrow, or what. Like you're really just taking the time for yourself. Yeah.
And I think more people need to, I guess, like view any type of movement from that standpoint, right? Like I think the fitness industry has its goods and it has its bad, just like anything. And I think there's still some like standard with the way you should look and the type of work that you're putting in, and it's lovely to see everyone have like a little bit more of like a health kick and wanting to take care of our bodies, but making sure that you're taking it from like a positive standpoint. Je pense que je vois beaucoup de monde qui viennent dans le cours, puis c'est comme après leur journée où je travaille beaucoup dans des salles chaudes qui sont, la chaleur est élevée, puis ça apporte un peu plus de challenge à tes cours aussi, au point où est-ce que des fois tu peux te sentir un peu débalancé, feel a little dizzy, especially if you're not drinking enough water. And puis je vois beaucoup de monde continuer même si leurs corps sont en train de dire like
I can't do this anymore.
Fait que de reconnaître que ces mouvements ne devraient pas être des punitions pour ton corps, mais une opportunité pour être de bouger, d'être conscient de ton corps and give it exactly what it needs. So at least in my class, I try to make it as accessible to everyone, offering variations that allow people to have more of a restful practice or more of an intense, fiery one. And the root is through conscious movement and through breath. And I think those are two very important aspects that I try to include in all my classes.
Yeah. I think in the last few years, yoga and Pilates have become like more and more popular and
very
accessible.
Trendy.
Yeah, and I always had that like préjugé on those two sports. I always associated them to like white women who stay at home and like while the kids are at school and everything. And it's like that's the image that I think was linked to yoga and Pilates for a while. I don't think it's like that anymore. Like all my friends and most of my friends are Middle Eastern or North African, and we all do Pilates and yoga.
Good.
You know? And I think like if I would go back in time and tell my teenager self that we would all be doing that, I'd be like, what? Like, I don't see this as something that we do, you know? But this is something that everybody does now. And like seeing you being a teacher and like teaching to all kinds of people those movements, I think is very inspiring, first of all, but also like empowering, you know? It's like, okay, it's not just for some types of people, it's for everybody. Like anybody, it's like movement, like
it's I see it as a pretty like foundational type of movement. I think there's many opinions in the fitness industry and what your body needs, but the way I see it is like your body needs both strengthening and mobilizing, and I see yoga being that opportunity to like stretch and lengthen your muscles versus Pilates is maybe more of a structured way of strengthening them while it being still soft. Like I think this hustle culture has like transcended into fitness where things need to be hardcore, it needs to be intense, and you need to do more burpees and run that extra K and burn that like cookie that you ate at lunch. Like none of that actually matters, in my opinion. I think it's all about balance, and I think everyone needs a little bit of it. And I think that is what's exciting about the fitness industry evolving, is with the hopes that it gives more access to people to this type of craft, both on a cultural aspect, but I also think on a gender aspect too, and just trying to like gain access, or even on an age aspect as well, having people tap into these different types of movement a little bit more consistently. I like recommend at least like once a week for either, just because I think it has the benefits to improve your entire life depending on where your goals are, regardless of what it is.
I have so many thoughts in my head like that I want to share, or like maybe pour comme orienter la conversation là, mais you know, like we're talking about like movements and like being accessible and everything, but also something entirely different but like parallel to this.
Go for it. Let's pivot.
Like nutrition. And I feel like the wellness industry often promotes like certain foods, certain meals, and a few years ago I had a personal trainer who was helping me recover from an injury. And at some point, like, he was like, I want to track what you eat, you know, so I can maybe target where you should be eating more protein, less of that, more of this, you know, just to get an idea of like the person I am, like how is my body working. how much food I need and all of that. And I was like, it's hard because like I live with my parents and we eat Middle Eastern food all the time. Like, how am I going to be able to like eat the foods that like I'm supposed to eat because this is what's popular and these are like the meal preps that everybody is suggesting. Like, I live with my parents. I'm not the one who cooks. And even if I was, the ingredients that we have at home or what I'm used to, what I know, what my body is used to like intaking is not that. And like, he was Middle Eastern. Well, he is Middle Eastern. And he was like, don't worry. Like, I know all of that. Like, I'll help you focus on getting everything you can get for your body within those perimeters, you know, of like Middle Eastern food, what you eat, what not. And he was able to give me like combinations of food so that I can get like all my nutrients, and not have to tell my dad to like buy me this probiotic and these graines de je sais pas trop quoi that he wouldn't know, you know. And I noticed how more and more these people in the wellness industry cater to different parts of the society that didn't have any service catered to them before, you know. Puis, je voulais... On en avait parlé un petit peu avant dans l'enregistrement, là, mais je voulais savoir un peu plus comme... Est-ce que tu as vu une évolution dans tes cours quand toi, tu étais encore étudiante en yoga and also as a teacher of like the people that are taking those classes and also teaching those classes? You know, there's obviously that stigma back in the days where it was all like white women, you know, who don't work, who have like a rich husband and everything. But like nowadays, that's not the reality of yoga and Pilates and personal training. Like, have you noticed that evolution?
Okay, so on the topic of food, I think there's a lot to be said. One, the access to information that we have is just crazy ridiculous. And I think a lot of people on these social platforms are kind of like advocating for what they do for their body and what works and what allowed them to lose this amount of weight or get those toned abs or increase muscle. And there's so many different perspectives and there's so many different opinions about it. And over the years, it's progressed so much, too. If I just look at, like, my own path where it was just, like, I think I played around with paleo diet for a little bit. That completely flipped my stomach upside down. Explored into being vegan. Explored just that protein and vegetables. Like, explored calorie counting. So there's so much that is evolving in the years for me personally. But I think there's so much circulating in the today and in the now. As far as my opinion around nutrition, I don't think I'm the best suited person to kind of talk about that. And there's a few reasons why, because one, I think I still have so much to learn on that topic. And I think there's so much that we need to be educated as far as like how our food is being processed and how it's being sourced and what impact that it has on long-term effect on our body and the energy levels that we put out. But then the other aspect is like we're all different, right? Like I have a lot of technology on me that allows me to track my amount of movement and my amount of sleep and my total recovery time. And I move a lot more than, I guess, the average. Yeah. And so the food that I'm able to eat probably looks a whole lot different than someone else. And I've just grown to be more of an intuitive eater. I have my own core values where, like, there's certain foods that I limit. Like, I'm not someone who eats a lot of meat. I don't consider myself vegan, but eating steak or chicken every single day just doesn't do good for my body. I end up just feeling a little bit more tired, a little heavier, a little bit more bloated. And so those are decisions that I make for myself. I'm also someone who sweats a lot because I work out a lot. So my salt intake must be so different as well. But I think what yoga and Pilates and that mind to body connection that I have is recognizing what foods make me feel good and what foods don't make me feel good, and how I choose to start my day, what I choose to take first thing, what vitamins do I feel like I lack. But I think it starts by creating some intuitive connection with yourself. Have a little diary, take notes of what like feels good and what doesn't, and change those eating habits and educate yourself. Don't go off someone's TikTok saying oatmeal is bad and I can no longer eat oatmeal.
Yeah, that's
because
the trend right now.
Like, trust me, I'm a little heartbroken. I'm like, I don't fully understand why.
I thought was good.
I thought so too. So see, like, okay, I think the beauty of social media is like, yes, it gives us access to such great information. Because of TikTok, I've become this culinary chef that I could whip up pretty much anything with in my fridge, given the inspiration that I have from these platforms. But then on the flip side is like sometimes there's some triggering videos where it's like, you should not eat any meat because, and like this like embellish and dramatize view around it. And we need to step away from it and being like our own like little researchers and see if it applies to us or it doesn't. Where you live is also a huge aspect, right? What access that you have to food, homegrown food, natural food, and all that extra stuff to it. But as long as you're doing your own research and you're applying it to your body, don't go too like straight narrow on one path would be like my recommendation on it. I don't think there's one size that fits all, and I don't think that there's one method that works for everybody. So food is like a very interesting topic that is constantly evolving. So yeah.
It's true.
Yeah.
For the food, especially the thing you said about TikTok, I relate to that a lot.
Yeah. Oh my God, I learned how to properly cut because I'm seeing these close-up videos of how people are cutting and understanding how spices work and just like getting creative in that way. But also like I try not to take it too seriously when I see like those big alarming videos of like you need to cut out all that stuff out of your life. It's like I actually don't have the time and bandwidth to count all my calories. Sorry, gym bro. That's my opinion.
Oh my God, I know I'm the same for the calories. Like I wish I was able to count the calories because I think it would help me to understand myself more. But it's so hard. Like there's just things that don't exist on the apps that I can't like put in. I can't put in the little dish that my dad makes at home every month in that app to calculate how many calories it was. But such is life. We're running out of time, unfortunately.
Went by so fast.
But there's like things that I still wanted to like.
Any burning last questions that you want to close up with?
Yeah, to discuss with you. I really wanted to know more about the diversity in your field today, like in the fitness, wellness industry.
Yeah. I think there's still a lot of room for improvement in inclusivity in classes. I think it's a constant pull between the value of service that is being offered and the costs associated to it versus the benefits that it and the accessibility that it should give to every single individual. There's definitely, like I work at many different studios and you could see the demographic at each studio kind of change. And I think the industry, both yoga and Pilates, as you could imagine, probably has some like trendiness to it, has some aesthetics to it. A lot of people are building businesses around it where you do have a lot of like more influencers or TikTokers that are kind of taking space in this field and creating a whole aesthetics behind it, which I could imagine results in people not feeling like they could be a part of this journey or type of movement. I think it's a practice of leading by example. I think the more instructors that are aware of those constraints, the better we will be. And so I try and play my role in making sure that it is accessible for everyone, especially in reformer Pilates. I think that it's a huge Western California thing where all the rich famous people are kind of on a reformer and getting those like nice toned abs and stuff like that. But at the root of it, it's not even about that. Like, at the root of it is to improve your posture and improve the strength in your body so that you could live a longer life. And so I just need to make sure that I'm like preaching that as much as possible and creating a safe space for people to move in my classes.
I love that you said that, and I hope that people listening are hearing this, because I think what happens often with social media is that we associate things to the wrong, like we generalize things in a way where, like, Pilates is like, if you do Pilates, you're the typical white girl, you know, and it comes with Starbucks and pink and Lululemon and yoga and all of that, you know. And some people are not going to identify to that persona, and they're going to be like, oh, I don't want to do Pilates. Like, why would I do that? It's not me. It's not a me thing. But it's not about like, it's not about that, you know. It's like, it's just to move. It's just to improve your body, your movement, your posture, and all of that. Like, it's literally just wellness. And I like that you said that, you know, because a lot of people are doing Pilates and yoga for the aesthetics. And I think there's no wrong reason to be doing yoga and Pilates, because at the end of the day, all that matters is that you're doing it. But because there's that stigma to it, I think a lot of people aren't embarking in that on that journey of like, I want to do Pilates too, I want to do yoga too, because they feel like it just doesn't fit whatever mold that they're in.
There's a fear, right? There's a fear of stepping into a room for the first time and trying something new. And I think it's applicable into the yoga and Pilates space, but I think with any form of activity. I mean, first time I got on my bunny hill on my board, was trying to snowboard for the first time. Like, I'm snowboarding with a bunch of 3-year-olds, and I was scared to just fall on my butt. But you get back up and you try it again, and you actually don't care what other people think. And so find an instructor that you resonate with, find an instructor that makes you feel seen and safe and that you can learn, because I fundamentally believe that this form of movement is necessary. And I think everybody should move, not only for the physical aspect, but I think for the mental health aspect. And I think what yoga did for me is honestly pull me out of a very heavy and deep depression. And I think that that's the reason why I do it. And if it saved me, then I think that it could actually save other people too. So I hope that people are able to get past their fear of trying something new, because I really think it has the power to wake you up.
I agree. And by the way, you're not the only person that I know that yoga helped them get through depression or very dark parts of their lives. Like, yoga really does that, you know? And I think
it brings you back, right? It brings your brain back into your body.
And I mean, you know, we make fun a lot of like aligning our chakras and everything, but I guess that's really what it does. It aligns everything within yourself, and it gives you a healthy mindset and perspective on things. And I just wish and hope that like more people get into those things, and don't like stay away from them just because they think it's not for them. You know?
I hope so too.
Like now around me, there's so many yoga instructors, like people becoming yoga instructors, people doing Pilates, doing yoga, doing all these sports, playing tennis. Like, I started playing tennis this summer also. And also for me, that was a sport that was like, that was more linked to like being white or whatnot, you know? Comme il y a comme toutes ces idées qu'on associe à certains sports.
Golf.
Yeah, exactly. And like nowadays, everybody around me from like different backgrounds, we're all finally playing these sports, you know? And I love that, because sports aren't just for specific people, you know? They're for like everybody. You can play whatever sport you want to play. And I think in today's world, a lot of them are more accessible financially as well. which is nice because then there's not always, I mean, there still is, but there's not always that like financial factor that comes into play.
Yeah, which is a huge factor for
yeah,
many people.
Yeah, a really big one. But yeah, I'm just happy like seeing like Dalia Chidoub as like a movement specialist is so cool to me, you know?
It's really freaking
like,
cool to me too.
It's not something to be taken for granted, you know?
I agree.
Like
my 8-year-old self is pretty impressed.
Yeah.
And that's why I do it. And I also do it because I see it changing other people's lives. And that's, yes, at the end of the day, this is what keeps me financially stable too. But I think the fulfillment from teaching is the aspect that I love the most of this career switch. So I'm really grateful for the space to be teaching, the space to learn, and to share my story. So
I'm grateful for the space you're creating for your students as well. And when you're humbling some students, it's really nice too. Just saying.
Were you humbled in our class?
I was humbled, but I think somebody else was really humbled as well.
Nice.
Anyways, thank you so much for coming.
Thanks for having
This was very insightful, and I think it's inspiring to people who think that maybe they don't belong in an industry, and for them to realize that, well, they belong anywhere, you know, like no one is telling you can't do it besides yourself. Yeah. So I love that.
Move past the fear.
Yeah.
Dive into it. What's the worst that could happen?
Literally.
Yeah.
Failure. And if you fail, you can just learn from it.
Try something else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like really not that serious.
Yeah. This is a dope conversation. Thanks for inviting me. Appreciate
Thank you. Thank you for coming. It's literally my pleasure. And I'm so sorry for the people who are listening if you were expecting this to be more French.
Yes,
but this is the reality of Montreal, English. You know. Sometimes it's easier to express yourself in English. Sometimes it's easier to express yourself in French. And sometimes it's easier to do it in both. So thank you for being comfortable speaking your truth in whatever language you feel good in. So merci tout le monde. Puis à la prochaine.